I want to ask you a question before we begin. What hurts more? The alarm clock that pulls you out of a warm bed at 5 in the morning? Or the moment, 20 years from now, when you look at your life and realize you never became the person you knew you could have been? Think about that for a moment, because one of those pains lasts for a few minutes. The other can stay with you for the rest of your life. Let me tell you something. Every single person on this planet is going to suffer. That is not a curse. That is not bad luck. That is simply the price of being alive. The only freedom you truly have is deciding which pain you're willing to carry. The pain of discipline or the pain of regret. There is no third option. Here's what most people don't understand. They spend years trying to escape discomfort, only to discover they have been running directly toward a much greater pain. They avoid difficult conversations. They avoid learning new skills. They avoid waking up early. They avoid exercising. They avoid saving money. They avoid taking responsibility. Every avoidance feels like relief, but relief has a receipt. And someday, life hands you the bill. I learned something years ago while watching an old craftsman build furniture. His hands were rough. His back was bent. His clothes were covered with sawdust. Someone asked him, "Why do you still work so carefully? Nobody notices the inside of the cabinet." He smiled. He said, "I notice." That answer stayed with me. Because discipline is what you do when nobody is watching. Regret is what you feel when everybody notices what you failed to become. Think about the tree standing outside. When did it become strong? Was it during one sunny afternoon? No, its strength was built during thousands of storms. Every wind bent it. Every season challenged it. Every winter tested whether its roots were deep enough. The tree never complained about the storm. It simply grew stronger because of it. And yet people expect greatness without resistance. They want confidence without facing fear. They want success without sacrifice. They want wisdom without mistakes. They want extraordinary lives built upon ordinary effort. Life doesn't work that way. Life responds to consistency, not intensity. Consistency. A single workout doesn't transform your body. One book doesn't transform your mind. One conversation doesn't transform your relationships. One decision doesn't build wealth. But thousands of small decisions, repeated quietly, repeated faithfully, repeated when nobody is clapping, that changes everything. Let me tell you about a young man I once met. He wasn't the smartest. He wasn't the richest. He didn't have connections. He wasn't naturally confident. He walked into every room believing someone else deserved to be there more than he did. Every opportunity terrified him. Every challenge made him question himself. One evening, he confessed something. He said, "I keep waiting until I feel ready." I looked at him and asked, "Ready for what?" He paused. He couldn't answer. Because readiness is often a myth. Confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence follows action. Discipline begins long before confidence arrives. That's why regret is so cruel. Regret whispers, "You could have." Not "you should have." Not "you might have." You could have. There is something heartbreaking about meeting an older person who still carries the dream they abandoned 30 years ago. Listen carefully. Dreams don't disappear. People simply become experts at ignoring them. The musician who stopped playing, the writer who stopped writing, the entrepreneur who never started, the father who always meant to spend more time with his children, the daughter who always wanted to tell her mother she loved her. Regret keeps perfect records. It remembers every postponed conversation, every delayed decision, every abandoned promise. Here's what most people don't understand. Time never argues with you. It never warns you. It simply keeps moving. Imagine standing beside a river. Every second, another drop of water passes. You can't reach back and collect yesterday's water. You can't negotiate with the current. You either use today, or today quietly becomes yesterday. People often ask, Why disciplined individuals appear calmer. It's not because life is easier for them. It's because they've practiced doing difficult things voluntarily. So when unavoidable difficulties arrive, they're already prepared. Discipline is rehearsal for reality. Life eventually asks everyone difficult questions. Discipline simply lets you practice your answers before the exam begins. Think about a blacksmith. Every strike of the hammer looks destructive. Metal bends, it glows, it screams under intense heat. But the blacksmith isn't destroying the sword. He's creating it. Sometimes life feels exactly like that. Pressure failure, loneliness, rejection, delay. The mistake is believing you're being broken. Sometimes you're simply being shaped into someone capable of carrying responsibilities your current character couldn't sustain. I remember hearing about a marathon runner who trained in terrible weather on purpose. Rain, cold mornings, strong wind. People thought he was crazy. One friend asked him, "Why not wait for better conditions?" He laughed. "What if race day isn't perfect?" That answer applies to every area of life. If your discipline only exists when conditions are perfect, then it isn't discipline, it's convenience. And convenience has never built greatness. Look around your own life. How many promises have you made to yourself? I'll start Monday. I'll start next month. I'll start after the holidays. I'll start when things calm down. Interesting phrase. When things calm down. Life rarely calms down. One responsibility becomes another. One challenge becomes another. One season becomes another. The perfect moment has disappointed more dreamers than failure ever has. Let me tell you something. Every successful person eventually stopped negotiating with themselves. The average person asks every morning, "Do I feel like doing it today?" The disciplined person asks, "What needs to be done?" Those are completely different lives. One follows emotions. The other follows purpose. Emotions are wonderful servants. They're terrible leaders because emotions change with the weather. Purpose survives the storm. Think about farmers. Imagine if a farmer planted seeds only when he felt inspired. Some years there would be no harvest. The farmer understands something many people forget. The season doesn't care about your mood. The seed doesn't wait for motivation. The work must be done anyway. Life rewards those who plant consistently, not occasionally. Here's another truth people rarely discuss. Discipline is actually an act of self-respect. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you quietly tell your mind, "My word matters." Every broken promise sends another message. I can't trust myself. That invisible conversation shapes your identity, not overnight, but gradually, one promise, one habit, one decision at a time. Imagine carrying two invisible backpacks. One is filled with today's discipline, the other is filled with tomorrow's regret. The first feels heavier this morning. The second becomes unbearable over decades. Which one would you rather carry? People often misunderstand freedom. They believe freedom means doing whatever you want. Real freedom is having enough discipline that your future isn't controlled by your impulses today. A person drowning in debt isn't free. A person controlled by addictions isn't free. A person enslaved by procrastination isn't free. A person ruled by fear isn't free. Discipline isn't the enemy of freedom. It's the doorway to it. I once visited a clockmaker, tiny gears, tiny springs, thousands of delicate pieces. He held up one almost invisible gear. "This little piece," he said, "looks insignificant, but remove it and the whole clock stops." Your daily habits work exactly the same way. Reading 10 pages, making one phone call, saving a small amount, practicing one skill, choosing one healthy meal. These actions appear too small to matter until years pass. Then, suddenly, everyone calls it success. Nobody applauds tiny gears until the clock keeps perfect time. Think about this for a moment. A mountain isn't climbed in one heroic leap. It's climbed through ordinary steps repeated despite extraordinary fatigue. Halfway up, every climber asks the same question. Can I keep going? The answer rarely comes from talent. It comes from identity. Who have you decided to become? Not what do you want? Who are you becoming? There's a profound difference because wanting changes daily. Identity changes decisions. When someone identifies as healthy, exercise becomes natural. When someone identifies as honest, truth becomes automatic. When someone identifies as disciplined, action begins replacing excuses. Let me tell you about an elderly teacher I once knew. He carried a notebook everywhere. Every evening before sleeping, he wrote one question. Did today's choices make tomorrow easier or harder? Simple question, powerful question, because every day is quietly voting for your future. Every meal casts a vote. Every conversation casts a vote. Every hour on your phone casts a vote. Every book you read casts a vote. Every excuse casts a vote. Every courageous decision casts a vote. The future isn't built in years. It's built in votes. Thousands of invisible votes that nobody celebrates until the results become impossible to ignore. Here's what most people don't understand. Success is usually invisible while it's happening. Failure often feels invisible too. Miss one workout, nothing happens. Miss another, still nothing obvious. Eat poorly today. No immediate disaster. Waste an afternoon. Life seems unchanged. That's why regret is so dangerous. It grows silently, like rust beneath fresh paint. By the time you notice it, it has already weakened the foundation. Discipline works the opposite way. Its rewards are delayed. You exercise today and still look the same tomorrow. You save money this week and still aren't wealthy next month. You practice speaking for months before anyone notices your confidence. The early stages of discipline require faith that today's invisible investment will become tomorrow's visible reward. That's why so few people persist. They mistake delayed results for absent results. Imagine planting an oak tree. Would you dig it up every morning to see if the roots were growing? Of course not. You trust what you cannot yet see. Yet people abandon their goals after 2 weeks because visible proof hasn't arrived. Roots always grow before branches. Character always grows before achievement. Patience always arrives before mastery. Think about an archer standing before a target. Everyone admires the arrow that strikes the center. Few people admire the thousands of arrows that missed quietly during lonely practice sessions. Behind every graceful performance, there were awkward beginnings. Behind every confident speaker, there were trembling voices. Behind every successful business, there were uncertain mornings. Behind every calm leader, there were private battles nobody witnessed. The world celebrates outcomes. Life rewards process. And if you fall in love with the process, rather than becoming addicted to applause, something remarkable begins to happen inside you. You stop measuring every day by immediate results, and instead you begin measuring your life by whether you honored your commitments. That's the day discipline transforms from something you force yourself to do into someone you become. Now let me tell you another story, because this one changed the way I think about ordinary days. There was a mason who spent nearly 40 years building stone walls. A young apprentice watched him one afternoon and asked, "How do you stay motivated laying the same stones every single day?" The old mason smiled without looking up. He picked up another stone, brushed the dust away carefully, placed it with absolute precision, and quietly said, "I'm not laying today's stone. I'm building the wall my grandchildren will admire." The apprentice looked confused, because all he could see was one stone. The old mason could not see only the stone in his hand. He could already see the wall. He could already imagine children running their hands across it decades later. He understood something that most people never discover. Vision changes the weight of today's work. When your eyes are fixed only on today's effort, discipline feels heavy. When your eyes are fixed on tomorrow's possibilities, discipline becomes meaningful. Think about this for a moment. Two people can perform exactly the same task. Both wake up at 5 in the morning. Both study for 2 hours. Both go to work. Both save money. Both exercise. Outwardly, they look identical, but inside. One person is counting sacrifices. The other is counting opportunities. One says, look at everything I'm giving up. The other says, look at everything I'm building. That difference is invisible, but over the years, it becomes enormous. Because your attitude determines whether discipline feels like punishment or privilege. Let me tell you something. The greatest prison isn't made of steel. It isn't surrounded by walls. It isn't guarded by locks. The greatest prison is the sentence. I'll do it tomorrow. Millions of dreams have died inside that sentence. Books that were never written, businesses that were never started, songs that were never sung, families that were never healed, adventures that were never taken. Not because people lacked talent, but because tomorrow became next week became next year, and next year quietly became someday. Here's what most people don't understand. Someday is not a day on the calendar. It never arrives. Every tomorrow eventually becomes another today. And if you don't change today, tomorrow simply repeats yesterday. I once met an elderly gardener. His garden stretched farther than the eye could comfortably follow. Flowers, fruit trees, vegetables, beautiful paths. People constantly complimented him. What is your secret? They expected him to reveal some special fertilizer, some rare seed, some hidden technique. Instead, he smiled and said something so simple that many people ignored it. I never let weeds have 2 days. What wisdom, not only for gardens, for life? Negativity is a weed. Procrastination is a weed. Excuses are weeds. Self-pity is a weed. Bitterness is a weed. Jealousy is a weed if you ignore them long enough. Eventually, they begin stealing nutrients from everything beautiful you're trying to grow. Discipline is pulling weeds while they're still small. Regret is trying to recover a garden after years of neglect. Think about your own mind. Every thought is planting something. Every conversation waters something. Every habit strengthens something. The question isn't whether you're growing. The question is, what exactly are you growing? Fear or courage? Resentment or gratitude? Excuses or responsibility? You see, character isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built in ordinary ones. How you respond when nobody thanks you. How you work when nobody checks on you. How you speak when nobody important is listening. How you behave when nobody could expose you. That is where discipline quietly shapes identity. I learned something years ago from watching a violin maker. People admired the finished instruments. They hung on walls. They performed on grand stages. But what fascinated me was what happened before anyone ever heard a single note. The wood rested for years before it was even touched. Years, not weeks, not months. Years. Someone asked why. The craftsman answered, because rushed wood creates poor music. That answer applies to people too. Everyone wants rapid success, instant confidence, immediate transformation. But lasting strength rarely develops quickly. Nature itself teaches patience. The strongest oak grows slowly. The deepest rivers carve their paths over centuries. The brightest diamonds spend an unimaginable time beneath crushing pressure. So why do we become discouraged after a few difficult weeks? Because comparison has stolen our perspective. We compare someone's chapter 20 to our chapter 2. We compare our beginning to someone else's mastery. Here's what most people don't understand. Every expert once looked completely ordinary. There was a day when every champion was unknown. There was a day when every great leader doubted themselves. There was a day when every successful entrepreneur stared at an empty bank account. There was a day when every confident speaker feared standing before a crowd. Nobody begins extraordinary. They become extraordinary. And becoming always demands discipline. Imagine entering a library filled with millions of books. Every shelf represents a different future. One shelf contains the story of the person who quit. Another contains the story of the person who kept going. One book tells the story of someone who blamed everyone else. Another tells the story of someone who accepted responsibility. The remarkable thing is this: every morning, your choices decide which book you're writing. Not once a year. Every single day, every morning, the pen is handed back to you. Some people write excuses. Others write endurance. Some write comfort. Others write courage. And page after page, sentence after sentence, the story becomes your life. Let me ask you something. If someone secretly followed you for 30 days, not listening to your dreams, not listening to your goals, only watching your daily habits, what future would they predict? Would they say, this person is becoming healthier? This person is becoming wiser? This person is becoming financially stronger? This person is becoming emotionally resilient? Or would they predict exactly the opposite? Because habits tell the truth that words often hide. Anyone can make promises. Habits reveal priorities. Think about an airplane preparing for takeoff. The hardest part isn't flying across the ocean. The hardest part is leaving the ground. Most of the fuel is consumed during takeoff. Why? Because breaking gravity requires enormous effort. Your life works the same way. Beginning is difficult. Changing direction is difficult. Creating momentum is difficult. But once discipline becomes your normal, the journey changes. Not because challenges disappear, but because you've developed the strength to meet them. That's why the first 30 days of a new habit often feel unbearable. You're not simply changing behavior. You're overcoming years of momentum, moving in the opposite direction. Imagine trying to redirect a massive ship in the middle of the ocean. It doesn't turn instantly. The captain doesn't panic after moving the wheel once. He understands that enormous things require consistent pressure. You are no different. Your life may not change dramatically in one day, but your direction can. And direction is far more important than speed, because someone walking slowly toward the right destination will eventually arrive. Someone running quickly in the wrong direction simply gets lost faster. I remember meeting a man who had rebuilt his entire life after losing almost everything. His business collapsed. His marriage ended. His confidence disappeared. People asked him how he found the strength to start over. He answered with words I have never forgotten. I stopped asking how far I had left to go. I started asking what today's responsibility was. That's discipline. Not solving your entire future before breakfast. Simply honoring today's responsibility. Today's phone call. Today's workout. Today's apology. Today's study session. Today's honest effort. The future isn't asking you to carry 20 years today. It's asking you to carry today well. Here's what most people don't understand. The mind